Yeah, the call of wild's always bringing me home. Call of wild's always bringing me home. Call of wild's always bringing me home.
Hello, wild ones. Welcome to another episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I am very excited to have my guest here, Nik Monastere, here with me today of Myth Root Studies. And Nik, how are you doing today?
Hi, Brianna.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to chat with you about your book that you just released, The Dreaming Land, which is all about the myths and legends associated with the national parks, which I'm very excited to get into as a myth and storyteller lover as well. I thought you did a really great job. So, yeah, I'm really excited to get into it. But just to start off, maybe talk a little bit more about your background and how it kind of led you to writing this beautiful series.
Yeah, sure thing. Growing up, I always loved reading and writing. From a very young age, I wanted to be a writer. Flash forward to high school, I was a smart kid, did not apply myself at all, classic tale. So I got out, kind of had a crisis of sorts, I guess. I ended up joining the military. I was an airborne paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division from 2010 2015. I was frontline infantry. Had a pretty rough go of it. I just did not fit military life very well at all, I guess. A little too
Yeah.
rebellious. Kind of a pain in the butt, if I'm being honest, for my leadership. But I was supposed to deploy to Afghanistan 2012, but I got hurt on a jump, and I had to have shoulder reconstruction surgery. And during that deployment, my best friend was killed. His name was Nikolas. He stepped on an IED.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I eventually did deploy in 2014 to Afghanistan. Got home, then got out of the Army in 2015, Honorable Discharge. I had a really hard time adjusting back to civilian life. That transition nearly got me. And then I guess it was 2018, I had a mental breakdown at the job where I was working in a factory. And I just quit mid-shift. I just gotten promoted to quality assurance only like a month or two prior. I just realized I was going down a really dark path. I didn't like it. And I knew that a good portion of it had to do with my decisions, I guess, career-wise. I was just chasing a paycheck, not necessarily trying to be happy. I know it's a very hard thing to balance for anyone.
Yeah.
But as a single bachelor at the time, I really didn't have much holding me back. So I stepped away, sold pretty much everything that wouldn't fit inside my rucksack. I really embraced the minimalist lifestyle and decided I was going to start traveling. Something I'd always wanted to do. And from trying to find a job on a cruise ship, I ended up finding a resort job in Alaska. And I spent a summer up in Denali State Park, and that just completely changed my life. It brought me back in a really, really big way. And after that, I became a seasonal worker, excuse me. I was working in national parks and resorts. And I ended up doing 2 summers in Denali, one in 2018 and then one in 2023. I worked at a ski resort in Colorado. I worked at the Grand Canyon and just outside the Black Hills in South Dakota for a short stint. I worked in Death Valley, California, Mohican State Lodge here in my home state of Ohio, and then just outside Cumberland Falls in Kentucky. And I just kind of found that through all these adventures and being around nature, it really revitalized me. One of the best things I ever did for my mental health. And because of my experience in writing, forgot to mention during that time also, I was consistently writing. I've been published a few times in short story anthologies, on a couple of podcasts. During the pandemic, I did work on video games and blogs. Pretty much anyone that would hire me. put pen to paper. And then with the recent, for lack of a better word, attacks on our national park system, I felt it was important to combine what I loved, that being the parks and writing, and try and do something bigger with it.
Yeah.
So I made it a point then to research the mythology surrounding the parks, as you mentioned, and then just retold them in my own words, kind of like what Stephen Fry did with Mythos and Neil Gaiman did with Norse mythology. And then it was released on May 30th of this past year. It was actually the 13-year anniversary of when my friend Levis was killed in Afghanistan. So I was able to tie everything together, I guess, from military to travel to writing. That's how I
Wow.
got here.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I really, first of all, I know I said it already, but I'm very sorry for your friend and your loss for that. And I know that being in the military is like very hard to especially on uh, people's mental health. And I think that it's really important. I've had a couple of previous guests, one specifically, my friend Harry Turner, that's coming to mind. And he had a very similar experience to you, where, but he went to the Amazon. And nature healed him as well. So there is this really big pull, I think, also for, not just veterans, but, specifically in your stories, that going towards nature is such a healing place. And I really love what you did with connecting your love of the national parks and just highlighting those stories and how it's helped you with your mental health. I think that's really such a beautiful thing. um, and I know you started, you said, in Denali National Park, right? So did you know the story then when you first went, the one that you told in your book?
No, not at all. So the traveling mostly came about from a mix of wanderlust and poor impulse control. I saw that. I don't know. I just saw the job opening for Alaska, and I figured that was like two birds, one stone. Because I needed a job, and always wanted to travel, and I'd always wanted to go to Alaska. So I guess that was three birds. Uh, didn't really know anything about Denali. Didn't know hardly anything about the national parks. Uh, it was just very serendipitous. So call it fate, call it luck, but it was incredible and
Yeah.
inspired. Again, just more wanderlust, but this time towards the literary side of things and cultural and seeing. Like these places obviously mean a lot to a bunch of people for a bunch of different reasons, but going back to like the native roots, I guess, the people who were the stewards of the land long, long before any white guy
Right.
got foot into that. Like
Yeah.
just helped form that deeper connection to the place and to really understand what gives it that gravitas, I guess.
Yeah, especially the Denali National Park story. Hold on, I have that here. Um, oh wait. Uh, yeah, but I feel like that, I don't know. I just feel like also with these stories, it's really special to be able to see it, like you said, from native voices, and hear their stories and on how they view and connect and describe the land and incorporate all of the different creatures. And I love being able to kind of see wildlife through their storytelling, like how and even in different parts and parks, how they use different animals for different, like, archetypes or vessels inside of the story, like the coyote, right?
Mm.
The one of your Bryce Canyon National Park story. And in other cultures of native people, how the coyote can kind of be a trickster, and he is a trickster in that story, but he's an agent for good instead of an agent for just trouble. So it's very cool to be able to see how they view different creatures. Are there any like specific themes, I guess, that you see in these stories that like really pop out to you that are similar, or any other takes that you have while writing this?
The first story that was featured in there from a wind cave in South Dakota about the emergence of the people from the earth. That one really jumped out to me just because it's so layered. Give a quick rundown for the viewers who haven't read or don't know the story. Once upon a time, all the people were gathered in a spirit lodge deep beneath the earth. And the spirit, the great spirit, I'm going to murder this pronunciation without the thing in front of me, Tungunkistan. I'm just going to call him the creator.
Yeah.
The creator kept everyone underneath the earth in the wind lodge, or spirit lodge, excuse me. And he told them to stay there until the world was ready, because he was making it perfect for humans. And then a couple of spirits got impatient, and they ended up being banished because they're kind of making problems for everyone below. And they were banished to the surface world and did not have a good time of it. And they grew very spiteful, but they grew envious of the people and still back underground. So they recruit the help of a wolf to go down, and on the wolf's pack they they send along like leather dresses and tan jerky and berries, and try and convince the people like, no, you should totally come to the earth right now. Like, forget what the creator said. And they go up, and first they love it, but then they're not accustomed to hard work. And then winter rolls around, and they realize, hey, like, we can't, we're not ready. And they try to go back to the spirit lodge, but the way has been closed now by snow. And the creator hears them wailing and comes down and says, like, what are you doing out here? Like, I didn't release you yet. And they explain what happened. And as punishment for their impatience, he turns them into the first bison herd. And then when the time does come for the people to come out, and the spirit says, okay, like, the earth is not ready. Now, when the rest of the people emerge from Wind Cave, they see all the bison hooves, and the spirit says, follow them. From them, you're going to get everything you need. They will lead you to water. You can eat them. You can use their hide for clothing and housing. Just everything you need will come from the bison. And then after everyone had left, the creator shrunk the cave so that people could no longer so freely move between it. And there's just so many layers when it comes to the themes there. Like trying to force yourself into a situation you're not ready for. How that just leads to disastrous results. Not listening to wisdom. I understand, especially in like native lore, there's a great emphasis placed on the wisdom of your elders. I understand sometimes that doesn't necessarily transfer so well to, I guess, like our modern Western culture. But it is important to listen to, those who have gone before and hear what they have to say. And then the idea too that when the people come out, once everyone's like released from the underground, the spirit shrinking the cave down, like saying like, hey, once you have progressed, there is no going back, like. And I think that just emphasizes that don't try to force any sort of growth. Like when you're ready for it, you're gonna be ready for it. And when that time comes, like you can't revert. Like you can only go forward. So that one really stuck out to me when I was writing it.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I really like that too. And I think too, in regards to like the listening to wisdom as well, and especially in these stories, many of them are about survival, right? So like if we're talking about like the difference between like modern times and more of like the wisdom is probably more like social etiquette based, as opposed to like the wisdom that was back then that's more connected to literal survival and survival skills, and not being ready to go maybe like hunt, or to you don't have the knowledge to gather or forage correctly, making sure you're getting the right plants. So like those type of things, like I think especially when you're saying that, and when I read it, stuck out to me as well.
100%. It's interesting looking back on this stuff with a modern lens, because I mean, I know it's an ongoing joke, like, okay, boomer.
Right.
But in some ways, like, you kind of got to give it up to the young kids. I mean, it's not necessarily the Zoomers and the Millennials who are being fooled by, like AI stuff, for example,
Hmm.
or like the technological the tech is it technological natives? Is that what it's called? Like the kids who grew up with,
Oh, right. Yeah.
yeah, and of course, if that technology ever goes away for whatever reason, like those kids are going to be, really wishing for the wisdom of their elders. But at the same time, though, it's the older generation who's really struggling with the lack of knowledge, I guess. So we're in a really interesting, interesting point in human history where the older generations have the wisdom, but not necessarily the know-how to navigate this growing world. Whereas the
Yeah.
younger generation has the know-how, like they know how this stuff works, but they don't necessarily have that life experience and wisdom to see the long-term ramifications of it, or how
Right.
this could go sideways. I mean, granted, I guess none of us really do because it's all so new,
Yeah.
but there's not that psychological backstop, I guess, inside the younger kids' brains of like, oh, just because something's really bright and shiny now doesn't mean it's not going to cause problems later. I guess going back towards the story we're just talking about. It's like, oh
Right.
yeah, this beef jerky and these berries and these really pretty leather dresses, these are all great, but you went after that too soon, and then you end up getting punished for it, or
Right.
it comes back to bite you.
Right. And in the story, it's the symbol of the creator saying like, oh, you did that too soon.
Mhm.
But in real life, or if that were happening in real life, like if we were using that today, like you said, with like AI, we don't know what the ramifications necessarily are, that, or like with certain technologies. I know one of the biggest concerns is the amount of water it takes to use AI. So that's one thing that has been passed around, like information. Again, that's the sort of thing that it's so new. And it reminds me of like, even, you see on TV, if you've had a reaction to this medicine, call, some lawyer to be able to have a suit, right? Because we don't know, until unfortunately there's years down the line. And then they'll either take it out of stores, or there's things coming up like this. So yeah, it is an interesting point you make, right, between the younger generation and the older generation, of how it's a weird passing of the baton, right, of time, and our present moment on how do we connect experience and life and connection, because a lot of people are technologically like using this stuff for like false connection. How do we be able to connect with people the way that maybe the boomers have, that like they're not used to technology, but then also still be in this modern time where we're not being fooled by technology. It's a very hard place to be, but yeah, it's and that's why these stories that you tell through this book, and that's why I think that storytelling and mythos is so important, because those themes still ring true. Like we can still look at those themes and see something that can relate to us even now in our modern time.
Oh, 100%. Uh, I think myth, well, to quote Joseph Campbell, he said, myth is much more important and true than history. And I mean, there's just layers to that quote as well. But of course, all cultures have their own mythology, and all of them have their own strong, I'm going to say, lessons that can be learned. So, of course, we're talking about the Native American myths now. Of course, each tribe is going to have its own mythology or versions. But then, though, so we go back to like the Greeks, for example. When Prometheus first gives fire to man, initially the gods take it back from him because they say, "Hey, like man is not ready for this yet." And then Prometheus disobeys and gives it to him. And the reason why the rest of the Olympians took the fire away was because they acknowledged the fact, like, while fire is great, it keeps us warm. We can cook our food. Keeps the predators at bay. Whereas you can also use it to burn down the house. You use it to make steel, which good and bad. It can be used to make a hoe to tend to your garden, or you can use it to make a spear to kill your fellow man. And I think there's big messaging there of, well, I guess we can tie it right back to AI. Just because something is powerful doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It's all about how it's being used. You can use fire to make a knife that you use to cut your steak, or you can use it to make a knife that you use to cut someone's throat.
Right.
And again, like the Greeks had no concept of AI. But being able to break down these meanings and find the metaphor and the truth in that is, I think, how you apply it to whatever situation is at hand. And storytelling is by far the best way to do that, provided people are actively engaging with it. Because if you just look at it on the surface level, it could be just an entertaining story. But if you really take the time to think and piece out, like, okay, this is the story, but what does it say? That's when the message lands. If you want to tie it to like Christianity, in the New Testament, like when Jesus is teaching, he very rarely goes out and says, "Oh, do this, do that, do Y and Z." He'll tell a story, and then like from there he expects you to figure it out for your own. Like, I don't know.
Right.
I think storytelling, no matter what lens you look at it from, is vital. And I think the world would be a lot better place if we taught people to not only read more, but to actively engage with the tale that's being told.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that there are so many, and obviously in like every culture, right, there is like this storytelling ethos of, the ancient past and like how that was right. Like, oral traditions were, many people's first access to these stories. And the thing that is very interesting about storytelling is that there's different interpretations from the storyteller and also from the person that is receiving the story. And what they pick up might be different, or what the storyteller is emphasizing might be different through each way that they tell the story. And what I still find very fascinating about that is that similar themes always pop up here and there, and like that's like one of my favorite things about mythology is how we can go to opposite sides of the world and there are similar themes, and how we're still connecting all as human beings. What we can read in the stories, like even the ones that you wrote in your book, are all similar themes that we as humans, modern and ancient, and people from near and far, all have together. It's something that is inherently connecting, but then it's also very unique to wherever the space is that they are bringing these stories about, right? Like they're each of the stories are unique to the area, or combining wildlife and the whatever's around you. But then the deeper you go, the themes that are there are still so connecting, and it's just one of the most powerful things about storytelling and myths that I personally really love.
100%. It's almost like there's just universal truths that we just,
Yeah.
kind of jump out at us from out of the ether that we just kind of instinctually know. And then the way, though, that we expose this truth is told through the filter of our culture and our upbringing, and then that comes forward in the stories. So, like you were saying, like the connections between like animals and nature. Uh, we have completely different species here on this side of the planet than what we do on the other, and yet, if you go to the native cultures and like go back far enough, they all still use animals and different natural like archetypes to get the message across. And it's going to be the same message, just delivered in a different way.
Right. Yeah. One of the stories that I really loved out of this series that you focused on was the Rainbow Bridge people, and that's of the Channel Islands, so the Chamush tribe in California, and I really loved it. So like the people of the land and the dolphins and what they choose to see as kind of like their brethren. So right, like they're the people of the land, but the dolphins are their equals in the water. And we also a couple of episodes ago, I had on a really wonderful. She was a tribal leader of the Anishinaabe people, Edith Leoso, and she's a very big advocate for clean water. But she's also a really great storyteller. And what she told me, first of all, she also says that, so I want to make sure this is clear, is that like to her and to the Anishinaabe, these are not myths. This is like their spiritual practice. So that's what they believe. So I feel like I should say that. So what we're referring to as myth is different for them, because they spiritually, that is their beliefs. But what she said was that their connection, the Anishinaabe, is with the wolf. So they call that term Mayengan, which is the wolf brother. And it's so interesting again to see a similar theme of, for the Channel Islands, for the Chamush tribe, that the brethren for them are the dolphins, and then in Wisconsin, in that area near the Great Lakes, the brethren are the wolves. So being able to really connect and value nature and see it as equal to them is so beautiful.
I'm really glad that you brought up the point that in some cultures this isn't like mythology. This is someone's genuine belief. I was really struggling with the subtitle of this book, Myths and Legends Associated with America's National Parks, for that very reason.
Right.
Because that's important. Like it's an important note to make, so I appreciate you doing that. But getting back though to what you're saying about the connection, that like brotherhood or family tie to nature, you see that a lot throughout the collection, not just the Chumash tribe, but that first story we're talking about from One Cave, like the bison were people, like they were the people who disobeyed the creator, but they're people nonetheless. And I think it's really important that we keep that in mind as a species, that how we choose to treat nature and other sentient beings is a direct reflection of how we're going to treat ourselves and each other. For several years, 3 or 4 years, I was strictly vegan. I've since fallen off of that. I'm not very proud of falling off. I would like to get back to it. But no, it is like humans tend, I think, to think of themselves as like the rulers of nature, like we're in charge of this planet. And I know it's almost cliche at this point to say like, oh, we just share the planet, and that's true. But more than that, we're stewards of it, because we have more power to change life on this planet than any other species. And for that reason, it really does come down to us to make sure we're using, or we're taking that responsibility with all the gravitas and respect that it demands. When I was in the military, I avoided any sort of leadership position as much as I could, because my philosophy was always like, oh no, there's so many people here who are more suited for this job than I am. Like, if I'm ever in a situation where I am the most qualified person to lead, yeah, I'll step up. But until then, I'm not going to actively seek it out. And looking back now, I realize that was just a cop out. But that being said, and with that philosophy in mind, it's like, well, there really is, like, us as a human species, there really is no one else who's going to step up and take charge and, try and right the ship that we ourselves have steered horrifically off course. So even if you do have that same mentality that I had, where it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to be in charge of anything because someone else is going to do a better job of it. It's like, well, there is nobody else at this point. It does boil down to us to take care of the planet and all the species on it, be it the dolphins in the water or the buffalo and the wolves on the land.
Yeah.
How the sort of life that we make for these creatures is directly tied to the sort of life that we make for ourselves. If there's
Yes.
if the buffalo have no home to roam, then neither do we. If dolphins can't swim through the ocean because it's too polluted, then that's going to affect us just as much as it does them. Maybe not in that immediacy of it, but it will come back on us in a big way.
Right. And I think a couple of points that I think too with what you're saying is, the first thing that comes to mind is that the importance of like your uniqueness, like there is no one else like you in the world, which I think that especially with your story and your struggles coming back, being a veteran and everything like that, and how we can place importance on uniqueness and like wanting to push off, right? Like, oh, somebody else is better at it. Like, you're going to have a unique perspective that like I love, like pushing this is because there is no one else like you out in the world. Like the way that you combined and your perspective of how you saw the national parks and trying to, put this like, and actually putting the book together, but like just trying to showcase the narrative of like how deeply connected and spiritual these places are that people are going to visit. And for those looking, that there are just such deeper and more connective stories there for people that can take the time to listen, right? And just your uniqueness, and like somebody else might have a different viewpoint, or they might have a different story, or a way to be like, oh, okay, well, I have this connection, or I have this friend that I can pass this information to, or maybe they didn't know this, or oh, that actually looks at me different, right? How we were talking about how people view stories and how people tell stories, it's all different, but you're the you I forget like the word that I want to use, but you're the person that is able to translate that into some change that you can make out in the world. And then the second point I was going to say too is that, for wildlife, one of my favorite things, the meme out there that's like eco versus ego, right? Like how we're one with the environment and looking at the environment as, oh, this is here just for us. But, I don't, I think that there needs to be an obvious perspective change for many people on this planet that, you know, living other sentient beings like dolphins, like wolves, like bison and buffalo, all the other creatures that we share this planet with, like, why does their value have to be on something that serves us? Like, having this mindset change of having the value of what we're looking at, creatures and species, like they have their own value just in what they're doing in the environment, and trying to change that narrative that we are over, looking over
Right.
all of these animals, instead of like, oh, we are one, like we are connected. And that's what is beautiful about the stories that you share in the Dreaming Land, is because many of these native stories tell that we are one, we're not separate. And even that one story, I think it was towards the end of the Dreaming Land, but it particularly fits with this narrative of like, I guess he goes on like a vision quest or something, and then he shoots the bear into the lake and then gets kind of punished
Mm.
for it after the land trusted him. It's like a good representation of this theme that we're even talking about right now.
That was the story about Lake Atagahi, the Cherokee legend from Smoky Mountains National Park.
Mm,
That was a really cool connection there. What
yeah.
I'd been thinking was the story of Spirit Panther from the Seminole tribe, which ties back to what you'd been saying about how like each individual like has their own ability and their own perspective and their own gifts that they bring to the world. I think it's important to keep that in mind always. Excuse me. Yeah, I think a lot of people through either, I might just be projecting here from my own past life. I think it comes down to a little bit of cynicism and a little bit of cowardice. So I guess, to be fair, I think they're like, cynicism is nothing but intellectual cowardice, to quote Henry Rollins. They either think like, oh, I can't make a difference. I'm just one person. What could I possibly do to, in the face of the everything? I think especially in Western culture, here in the US specifically, we tend to look at history through the lens of like the great men of history. It's like, oh, George Washington did whatever. There was an Abraham Lincoln. There was a Martin Luther King. There was a Malcolm X. There was this one individual who made all the difference. And not to take away from any of those people's merits or status, but it's not like George Washington fought the Revolutionary War by himself. It's
Right.
not like, Martin Luther King marched alone on Washington, D.C. It was 100,000 different voices rising up and coming together. And to say, it's like, oh, I'm just one person, what can I do? It's like, well, you can step to the right side of history. You can draw that line in the dirt where you find that thing that's means the most to you and just defend it. I'm a firm believer that all just causes are connected in one way or another. So, like, just talking now, like stewardship of the earth, taking care of the national parks, that extends to wildlife conservation.
Hi, wild ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. This episode is sponsored by my clothing brand, Femme Sauvage, and you can find a discount code and link in the description. So check it out. We have a lot of amazing designs, and $5 of the proceeds goes to different charities. So please feel free to check it out and enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks so much. Yeah, so going back to your point, which I really like, that I think that's really important, is all those people, it showcases two things, right? The uniqueness of each of those people and that they are making a difference, but they wouldn't be able to have made a difference without the connection of all these other people helping them to to make a difference, you know. It reminds me of a post that I just saw the other day too about awareness, and it was posted from this veterinarian called the Jungle Doctor, and how much making it, like bringing awareness to things, actually really makes a difference. Like to your point that you were saying earlier about how, you know, all of these things are connected, like helping to educate people and realizing, oh, this is not the right thing. I mean, to be fair to some of those people, right, like maybe they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So once they are aware of, you know, especially when we were younger, right, like thinking about SeaWorld, and you know, I was 6 years old going to SeaWorld thinking, oh, this is really great, but it's not great for the orcas or the dolphins, and they're stuck inside of these very small tanks. And changing that viewpoint, and then learning so much over time. And then I just recently went to Mexico and was able to see both orcas and dolphins in the wild, and being able to see them free and in the wild, and then have like that wild connection is so different also than them being just stuck, you know. It's, hey guys, look. Shh. Come here, Watson. Shh. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, so they should hopefully be done very soon. So, but they can still hear them up there, even though they can't see them. But yeah, so basically, like, my point is that, you know, and that was basically through word of mouth and letting people know, and Blackfish and documentaries, showcasing the harm on what's happening. And that's just one simple thing. That's not even, you know, that's obviously like the other thing that's happening right now, which I would love to talk to you about, with which is like our national parks and our public lands, and how they're trying to sell off our public lands, and the importance of not only these stories that these places have been sacred and ancient since forever, and their importance of just leaving them be, as opposed to trying to, you know, extort our value over them, being like, well, this is empty land. You know, it's not, it's full of history, and the importance of nature and wildlife and value and spirituality is all tied in and connected also with the national parks and our public lands.
100%. It's one of those things where there's only benefit for the general population that we protect the parks. I can't remember the exact amount of money that it takes to run the parks. I think it's like $5 million a year, or that's how much they have been getting, because their budget just keeps getting slashed. But like just last year, the parks were like $5 million to operate, and then they brought in $44 million in revenue.
Wow.
Again, just ecosystems, taking it back to the animals. I mean, most of the wildlife rehabilitation programs, like reintroducing gray wolves to certain parts of North America, trying to get the bison population up, they all take place on federally protected lands where people can't hunt. We run the risk of losing our souls, I think, by selling off the parks for private corporations to mine and log and, you know, destroy for the benefit of a very few, when it's public land. Like these are our lands. It doesn't belong to, you know, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, or, you know, plug or play your least favorite billionaire. It doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us, the people. And the idea that we're going to like somehow sell these lands for exploitation to make up for the lack of funds that we have from not charging those very same billionaires taxes is just, it's sickening. Like, last time I was up in Alaska in 2023, I drove up there with some friends. I just followed behind them in my SUV, and they were towing their camper. We road tripped through Canada, and it all ended in a boat tour off the coast of Seward. And we got to go see, we saw orcas, puffin, sea otters, sea lions. And then at the very end of the tour was a glacier. And just watching this glacier like crack and fall apart right in front of us. On one hand, it's like, oh wow, this is like incredible, not necessarily for the better, but it's kind of amazing to see something that size shifting and moving and breaking up. But then, though, you carry that line of logic out, and it's like, oh wow, I'm seeing this. My niece, who's 3 years old, may never get to see this because all the glaciers are going to be. Even like Glacier National Park, when it was first designated as a national park, I think there's 24 glaciers. Now there's only 5.
Wow.
That's throughout the span of just about 100 years. Another thing, when we were up in Alaska, I forget which park we were in, but as you're walking along this path, off to the side there's these copper coins on the path with just random numbers on it, like 1898, 1914, 1976, 2004. And then after you're done walking this path, going back to the park center, the rangers explained that where those copper discs were marked how far the glacier had been at that time. And it was insane, like well over half a mile. Like just how far they had receded throughout the course of only a century. And that's just one location. At the very end of the Dreaming Land, I included an essay that I wrote in 2020, back when the West Coast like burned down, about how what makes the national parks so beautiful is that they sit at these extreme ends of the spectrum when it comes to like nature. They're in these very high and very remote places, and that's how they're able to retain their beauty. That's why we love them and we visit them, we seek them out. But because of their place, like on that spectrum, they're the ones who are those are the places that are the most susceptible to the effects of climate change. And that's what we're seeing now, not just with like those 2 examples there with the glaciers, but even in like Mount Denali National Park, like massive sinkholes are opening up everywhere just because of like all the methane's escaping from the permafrost, and now the ground is literally caving in. The Everglades, has its rich biodiversity because of the very delicate mix of fresh water and salt water. Like that's what allows for the diversity of species. And now with Florida just being inundated with salt water from rising sea levels, like that's all going away. All these places that millennials like us maybe got to visit growing up on like family vacation, this stuff like it's just going away. And unless something happens like soon, like it's never going to come back. I mean, granted, I know everything has its life cycle, but it's kind of absurd. Like when you think like geological time, we're talking hundreds of thousands of years, if not into the millions. But now we're seeing these extreme effects in only a century or 2. And as that snowball continues to roll down the hill, it's just gathering up more and more speed. And it's easy to say, oh, this is just Chicken Little screaming about the sky falling, but it really is. I mean, not trying to sound too cynical, because again, that's just nothing but cowardice, but I think that should be a call to action for people. Like no matter what you think you can. It was Henry Ford, I think, said, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're probably right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there needs to be a massive shift in the way we view the world. To go from this, oh, I'm just tiny little me. I can't stand up to these big corporations. I can't do any. I have no effect over what happens in Washington D.C. and blah blah blah. And like I understand, I was there. Like that was my mindset for the longest time.
Right.
But then I think it was just yesterday they did make an amendment to the bill they're voting on. I think today. They did make an amendment that saves a good chunk of the parks, which they were going to vote to auction off, but still not all of them.
Yeah.
Which should be all of them. But just for people calling up their senators, I've called the Bernie Moreno's office. He's my senator. I called his office like 3 times in the past 2 months, or since I found out about just how much this bill was going to affect the national parks. And I know a whole bunch of other people have as well. And it's important to keep that in mind, where it's, one voice might not rise above the chaos, but a choir can.
Right. Yeah. And that's the importance too of awareness, right? And like letting people know what's happening, what's going on. I really I love people that show like, hey, like here's how to do this, and like make it really easy for people. Like here's the number, here's a script, like to call your senator, and to make a difference, right? Because like you're saying, like it takes a chorus of people to, thankfully so many people have called to make a difference, but I hope that something also happens with this, that maybe it still doesn't get passed with how much they're trying to still sell. But another thing that I think about too in regards to the national parks is like that even before they were made national parks and they're just a part of this landscape, like the thing that I think truly makes America America, and why people, came here, like immigrants and everything like that. Obviously, people came and stole native land from these people. I think that's important to mention when I'm talking about this. But the thing that draws people in is the wild landscape. Like the like expeditions out west to be able to see all these landscapes, and these are places that are historical just for what they are, and that's really what makes America America, is these natural wild landscapes. Like there isn't, I mean, there are other places on earth, but like just I don't know, there is something very special about America and being connected to these wild, like we don't have, like we have like a couple of places maybe that have like history, but like it's not like, I guess, like I'm thinking like Europe, where they have like in Greece, and they have like the Acropolis and all of these different, or like Stonehenge in England. Like maybe there are some like places like that I'm not remembering in the moment, but what really is historical for us in America are these natural landscapes, and that they really should belong to all of us, and that just obviously like conservationally thinking too, is that we're connected to these places because people live near them, where we live on these landscapes, and the more that we're selling off and disturbing the landscape, it's going to have a very negative impact on us in the future. And that is the people that know that it's going to have an impact, and the people that don't even realize that it's going to have an impact. And I hope that those people that don't realize that it's going to have an impact, if they have children, it's going to impact them and their future children. Like that famous quote is that we're not living in the now, we're borrowing time from our children. Especially for me, as someone that has a son and wants the best out of life for him, I want to make sure that there is a really good planet for him to be able to live on and explore. And not realizing the separateness of the wild from us too. I think that the more that, and like the more that people like you are telling these stories. Yesterday I had on somebody who is like a bushcraft survivalist, which was very cool too. But trying to pull people in to being in the wilds and being comfortable and recognizing and appreciating the importance of these spaces. Because again, it's not ego versus eco. Like we are one, like we are connected. What happens in these landscapes will eventually affect us. It's not when, it's or not if, it's when.
Right. I like what you brought up about how like we don't really have those like the man-made
Right.
like historical places. Like we don't have Stonehenge, but we have El Capitan. And if people like a few years ago when the roof of Notre Dame caught fire, or like everyone like online, it seemed like just jumped into crisis mode. It's like, oh, we gotta raise all this money to save the roof of this church, and I'm not knocking that at all. But also, like, I feel there should be just as big, if not a bigger push to save our Stonehenges, our Notre Dames. But for us, again, that's going to be like El Capitan, that's Yosemite, or I already said, sorry, that's redundant. That's going to be like El Capitan, that's going to be Denali, that's going to be Glacier National Park. Our heritage isn't man-made here, like, it's natural.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just want to see people fight for that heritage, that culture. I understand a lot of this culture comes from, people from overseas coming and stealing it from other people. And there's no justification for that, but it is what it is. This is where we are now. But if we're going to take over this land, then we're taking that responsibility of being the stewards of it.
Right.
And considering the fact that, like, our kids, like in Europe, when they have like a leap year, it's like, okay, like, no, go out, go see all these different countries, see all these wonderful sites, go to the mausoleum in Greece, go to Notre Dame in France, go see Stonehenge. Here in the U.S., there's like the Great American Road Trip. I think is what a lot of kids, getting out of high school or before college. We don't necessarily have that leap year tradition, but there are a lot of people who, think about traveling when they first graduate. And I don't know, just reviewing it through that lens, where, well, would you want to go to Stonehenge if, someone knocked over all the rocks so they could dig an oil field? Would
Right.
you want to go to Notre Dame if there's a giant hole right in the front where they were mining for uranium or whatever? Say, well, then why would you allow that to happen here? I mean,
Right.
I think people really need to take that ownership of it. And to go, I didn't ask for it. It's like, yeah, well, none of us did, but this is the situation we're in. And while I don't have any children of my own, I've got several nieces and nephews. And then I think just going back to the military background, even though it was a bit of a panic decision, talking to like my BA therapist, you don't become a soldier or a Marine or an airman or what have you unless there's not that sliver of a protector in you. Like you want the people you love and care about to be safe. And that circle grows as you get older. I guess it grows to mean more. Like maybe your friend circle shrinks, but what matters to you continues growing. And when I say, like, I love this country, I'm not necessarily talking about the politics. I'm definitely not talking about the politics.
Right.
But that natural heritage of ours. Even things like the Civil Rights March, the Black Lives Matter, the No Kings. All these things are part of our heritage. And as cruddy as some parts of American history are, there are some really great parts as well. And I think that by fighting for the national parks, you're fighting for this country. Like I've been saying earlier, like when you draw that line in the dirt, it's kind of amazing how like once you actually step up to it and put yourself like right there on that front line, when you look left and right of yourself, like there's 100,000 other people out there defending things that matter just as much to them. And as long as you're on the right side of history, it doesn't matter what the cause is. It could be national parks, it could be veterans benefits, animal rights, women's rights. It's all going to be connected in one way or another. I recently wrote an essay about exactly that. And if you look at like the struggle between justice and injustice, freedom, fascism, you really can't view it as like just these individual battles that you're fighting for whatever cause you're choosing to champion. It's all just part of a longer front line. And no matter where you stand on that front line, if you look down far enough one way or the other, you're going to find me. And I think that holds true for everyone.
Yeah.
So, I just, again, for me, just having that deep tie to the national parks, them literally saving my life. This is my line in the dirt. But I also know that by standing behind it, I'm standing behind everything else. So if you try and stretch your energy towards everything that matters to you, you're just going to wear yourself out. So that's why it's better to pick a lane, stick to it, and then you just have to have faith in the goodness of people and those on the left and right of you that they're in their lane fighting just as hard as you are with whatever skill or whatever gifts that they have available to them. Be it like me with my writing, you with your platform here.
Thank you.
You go out to like the musicians, punk rock and folk music.
Yeah.
Whatever gift or like weapon you have available to you,
right,
should be used.
Yeah, that's like that incredible point of uniqueness, right? And I think that that's really special. And I think that also helps with people's mental health because a lot of times when people are going through mental health problems, and, I know that obviously you've gone through that and through the national parks, you've found that, that sense of healing again, right? And through that. And through uniqueness, people can find their own way, and that gives them then their own confidence. And I know, like similar-ish, but a lot of people want to work in the wildlife sector, right? And they're always like, "Well, I don't know about my skills." And I've had a couple of different people on be like, there's so many different opportunities if you want to help just in the wildlife space. Like if you're a lawyer and you love wildlife, you could be a wildlife advocate and go into court for them. Like you said, there's so many different paths that your uniqueness can bring, and you want to combine different things like wildlife protection and maybe your social media creator. Like that's a really great way to do that. I think that there's obviously pros and cons to living in the now, but one of the pros that I think is pretty amazing is this really great connection that we have with the internet. It is, of course, on the downside, it can be a very big negative thing for people's mental health. But if we can try to use that to focus on making really big change, which it has happened, and making people more aware and bringing education, and then also pushing your own uniqueness and what you can do, and like your loves, and through your loves and your connections and what you're passionate about, you'd be surprised, I think, about how much that really makes a difference. And I was talking to somebody the other day too about like imposter syndrome and trying to like break free of that, and how healing's always a journey. And so I think that kind of like pushing past that imposter syndrome can kind of be a journey. Like I would be lying if I said that I didn't have that pops up like, oh well, what am I doing with this podcast? But I think just pushing again that narrative that you never know, even if it's one person that makes a difference, or if you clean one beach, even your small action makes a big difference because everything is connected. Like one of the things that I chatted about with my friend Edith on that one episode before was how she, even in Wisconsin, the seabirds come up and are affected by, like storms and such from her area. Or, I probably explained that bad, but how even like, birds are migrating from different areas um and from, 1,000 miles away, but those connections are still there. And yeah, just that everything is connected, and even if you just start small, even if you just start close to home, that could be more than of a bigger change, or you're inspiring somebody else.
It makes me think 2 points. One, my 8th grade math teacher, Mr. Mayhack, he had this story about how once there's a little girl walking along a beach, and there's all these starfish had gotten washed up during high tide, and now they're out there just baking in the sun, slowly dying. And it was just starfish as far as I could see. But she started bending down, then one by one she would huck them back out to the ocean. And she does this for quite a while, and a man walks up to her as she's picking one up. And he says, "Why are you even bothering? Like, you're not going to make a difference. Look at all those." She throws one in her hand. She said it made a difference to that one. I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. And that brings me to another point. That movie Schindler's List, about a real life Nazi during World War II, became disillusioned, and he started helping people like out of the chambers, or he would keep them alive, like people who were scheduled to be like exterminated. He would fudge the paperwork, keep them alive, and he ended up saving a couple hundred.
Mm-hmm.
He was always racked with guilt because of the fact that he couldn't save more. And then I can't remember if it was him or another member of the Nazi Party, but in some point in the 1980s, he was invited onto a talk show, and he was sitting out in the front row of the audience, and the host is telling his story. And then after he was done telling the story, everyone in the audience from like all ages stood up, and it was like a full studio of a couple hundred people, and every single person in that studio was a descendant of someone that man had saved.
Wow.
So it really goes to show how it's like, even if you only change one life, like, it goes back to what you had said earlier about how we're not living in the now, we're borrowing from our children. Like, what you do now, quote Gladiator, what we do in life echoes through eternity.
Such a good quote, too.
Yeah. So I think it's important that people really keep that perspective in mind. Like, it's hard to envision the future. I get that. Especially when it can feel like it's going to be a bleak world to live in by then. But we have to hold out hope that better days are coming, and that it's going to be all the more better if we keep that faith, and if we keep that mindset of what I'm doing now is important. What I'm doing now does matter. I was using the gifts that we have available to us to ensure that happens. It's only helping out ourselves and our species in the long planet. But we just have to keep our eyes on the ball and not get distracted by the constant flood of just bad news. Especially
Yeah,
because that's kind of
people,
what the algorithm.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially too, because like that's kind of like what the algorithm feeds on. Like it knows you're going to click on the bad stories. Like Stephen King said, man comes home and kisses his wife. Doesn't sell headlines the way that man plows through protesters does.
Right.
But it's still it's just important to keep that in mind, I think, too, that the world isn't necessarily all doom and gloom. It's definitely doomier and gloomier than what it was a few years ago. But there's still good things. For example, like we were talking about earlier, how they did strip back a lot of the acreage that was in that bill. That's the only one that's really coming to mind now. But again, like
Yeah,
we've
no,
gotta
I know. And
we have to keep our
yeah,
mind on that though. It's like, okay, like a difference was made.
right,
Now we just,
right.
that's our stronghold. Like to use like a military analogy, like we have a foothold. From here, we can start planning, start organizing, and keep pushing forward towards the objective. Right. Exactly. Mhm. My first trip up to Alaska stands out, probably the largest. That was just such a huge dopamine hit. um, uh, that one stands out the most, just because leading up to that, I was like suicidally depressed, abusing all of the alcohol, uh, really big like self isolating. I was doing like 12-hour shifts at a factory, coming home, killing a case of beer and then some, and then just wake up the next morning with a hangover, just enough time to eat something greasy and then go back to work and rinse and repeat that cycle. Uh, so going up to Alaska and seeing Mount Denali for the first time and just connecting with so many great people. For any listeners who want to be a like you're saying, go out on an adventure, I can't recommend seasonal work enough. Coolworks, all one word, .com is a great place if you want to find a job in the industry. You can do front desk, you can be a server, you can bartend, uh, become a tour guide, be a naturalist, concierge, pretty much anything you could think of, you can do for a resort in the national parks. So Denali will always hold, that first summer especially, will always hold a really special place in my heart. I really like the Grand Canyon. I worked in a town called Tucson, Arizona, not to be confused with Tucson. It's like 5 miles maybe away from the South Rim, but it's in the middle of a national forest. The name escapes me now, but that was great. That was the most time I spent in one place. I stayed at the Grand Canyon for 9 months. That was absolutely wonderful. Not just the location, that was also my very first bartending job. Loved it. And then having the park, the canyon proper right down the street from where I was, and then just being surrounded by the national forest was incredible. Corbin, Kentucky, which is right outside Cumberland Falls. That place will always be really special. I attempted a bicycle ride across the country without any bike training at all, it's worth noting. In 2022, it was after Afghanistan fell, and another good friend of mine died. He overdosed a few days after the country fell. Dramatic escape, poor impulse control. I was like, I'm just going to bicycle from Cincinnati area down to Fort Benning. Cincinnati area, Hamilton, Ohio specifically, is where my friend Levis, who died in 2012, was born. And I thought, I'll bicycle down to Fort Benning, where we went to basic training in airborne school. And my knee just completely gave out on me. In Corbin, southern part of Kentucky. And I said, okay, I'll hang out here for like a day or two, heal up, and I'll keep going. And I just fell in love with the area and ended up staying. But Kentucky, Cumberland Falls, again, just one of those points where I was coming out of a really, really dark time in my life. And then did that big adventure, like what you were just recommending. That really helped me out. Being there in the Niagara Falls of the South. And I ended up falling in with a group of content creators. And I started renting out their backyard shed, which more or less converted into a tiny home. And I got a job bartending, just printed off my resume at the library. Yeah, spent a summer living out of a shed and bartending during the day, and then going to Lake Cumberland or Cumberland Falls during the weekends, like just 5-6 miles away. That was probably the last like real like summer of my youth. I think I'm 33 now. So it was like I was turning. Let's see, how old was I? I think I was 30. But yeah, that was kind of
Yeah.
like my farewell youth. It's been great, and going on that sort of a high note was incredible. So Cumberland Falls, Denali, Grand Canyon. I don't know, they're all really special in their own way. But if
Yeah. They're all unique, different landscapes too,
100%,
right? Which is pretty
yeah.
cool.
Probably, yeah, that's another thing about Denali. That's when I really fell in love with mountains. So moving back to Ohio has been pretty depressing, not just because it's Ohio, but because there's a decided lack of mountains in the area.
Right. Yeah. Got to make your way back to the mountains, or at least to explore more of Ohio nature,
Right,
right?
maybe southern Ohio, so it gets a little hilly down there.
Cool. That's wonderful. Well, Nik, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed your book. So thank you so much for sharing it with me. And for people listening that want to get it, just tell them all the details on how they can get it and where they can connect with you if they want to do that.
Of course. So the book is called The Dreaming Land: Myths and Legends Inspired by America's National Parks. Currently only available as an ebook. You can find it on Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing. I am working on an expanded version, a couple more myths, trying to flesh it out, make it proper size to the point where I'm comfortable charging people for a paperback. Right now, I think it's 25,000 words. I want to flesh it out to a full 36 to 40,000. But yes, that can be found on Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing. If you would like to connect, the Instagram handle is at mythrootstudios.com, or there's no .com, I guess just at mythrootstudios. Find me on Instagram. That's probably the best place to do it.
Okay, perfect. And I'll make sure to link that below so people can, but I always like people to say it too. So if anybody's listening, they can be like, oh, okay, that's where I go. And I also wanted to highlight too, which was really beautiful of you, is that you were donating some of the funds to the National Parks Foundation. Is that correct?
Correct. I was actually just going to bring that up. So initially, I was going to have it just be the first month. 100% of all the funds were going to go towards the national parks. Just different conservation efforts. But now I'll announce it here. I've decided that here on 4th, I'm just going to donate 100% of all the proceeds. As a veteran, I get just enough like VA disability to make life manageable. So until we can be confident that the national parks are safe, I'm going to be donating all proceeds. And then I'm going to keep just using this book to perfect my marketing skills, I guess. And then I keep an eye out for other volumes to follow shortly.
I'm very excited. You'll have to keep me in the loop when those are available, because I definitely really enjoyed this. And it's a really fun read for people listening that want to listen. I think you do, again, a really good job of, telling these stories, and then giving the proper information of, what tribes they come from, and then also some factoids about the national parks at the end. So you're really immersed in the American wild landscape of the national parks, which is really beautiful.
Another thing, too, worth noting for any of the listeners, at the back where the glossary and the bibliography is, I also included lists of national park conservation groups, everything from like the National Park Conservation Association to some of the more direct action groups. You will also find websites for the official websites for the various tribes from whose stories I drew. So other Native American conservation, or not conservation, Native American like charities, or just groups that raise indigenous voices. You can find those at the back of the book as well. And so if there's any portion of it, any aspect of the book that jumps out to you the most, be it the national parks themselves or the cultures that inspired them, there's other ways for viewers and readers to seek out more resources and possibly donate, or at least get more information about them.
Awesome. I'll try to include some of those resources too in the bottom, so people can really enjoy and fuel their own research. But thank you so much again, Nik, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I had such a lovely chat with you and really enjoyed reading your book and connecting with you. And I really am looking forward. You'll have to let me know when you finish writing the rest, because I'll definitely be reading it. So thanks so much.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. Really enjoyed this conversation. Absolute delight.
Oh, thank you. Me too. Anything about, storytelling, myths, legends, all that kind of stuff, and the wild is right up my alley. So wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Wild Ones, for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye. Bye. Okay, perfect.